Now, hijacked buildings continue to be a major concern, especially in Johannesburg. There are growing calls for government to develop a comprehensive urban renewal plan for the city. This includes the rehabilitation of hijacked buildings. Some organizations are calling on government to provide temporary shelter to support affected individuals. To discuss this further, we are joined by Motsi Khokhoma, the national coordinator at Cry of the Excluded. Motsi, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. Just first of all, government saying that organizations are calling for them to actually provide shelter to those that they remove from this building. It's not about calling for them to remove these people from the building, right? That's what the law stipulates. You have to give them an alternative source of accommodation.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your listeners as well. Yes, it is true. When you take people out of their places, you need to give them a shelter. But for now, what happened in Joburg, we are calling the government to really assist these people. They can't be on the street when they were having their own shelter, which the government termed as hijacked buildings around Gauteng. But how did this come up? They are now blaming the NGOs, but we think the government should take the blame, because you can't let people stay in that kind of a building for so long without doing anything. Even if they are doing the NGOs scapegoat of for them to do their work. We are not thinking, as the Cry of the Excluded, that is the proper way to go. We can't point fingers now, but the fingers should be pointed directly at the doors of the government.
I mean, you also mentioned in your statement, for instance, the rehabilitation of hijacked buildings. This particular building where 77 people died was a building that was owned by the city. So if they can't even manage their own buildings, how do they manage other buildings?
That is the problem that we are facing in this country. We don't have a government at all. The government now really doesn't do anything to anybody, doesn't assist the poor and the excluded. So they will always blame other people rather than doing the work that they are elected to do. Remember, but let me start by extending our condolences as the Cry of the Excluded to the families and friends of the people who died in that fire. You can't have 70 plus people died and then we are just quiet about this. The government must take the blame. The government must look at the buildings that are there. It is not only in Joburg that these people are saying there are buildings that are being hijacked. Yeah. Why buildings are being hijacked when we have landlords? Why? It is because the government doesn't do its work.
Yeah, they cut budgets, like you're saying, but also for me, Mr. Khokhoma, it's about the fact that they've made this about the city of Johannesburg, when in fact, as a municipality, there's an issue in areas like Alexandra. There's an issue in areas such as Excluded. There was an issue where the mayor said he would make sure there's 150 million rand available to fix the problems of hostels in Soweto. So this is a housing issue that goes beyond just the city of Joburg, and the fact that even the houses that government builds, for instance RDPs, are then sold illegally by government officials.
That is why I said we don't have a government for starters. And then you mentioned the austerity measures that the government is implementing, the cuts across the board. How can they implement what they promise people when they cut the funds across the board, your health, your infrastructure, your policing, your education? So the corruption that is rooted in this government, it is the one that is bringing us all these disasters. It is not only that it is happening in Gauteng, I agree with you, but because of the austerity measures that this government is implementing, it cost us all these things: unemployment, corruption, petrol hikes, everything that we are faced with as the poor of the poorest and the poor working class in this country. It is man-made by the government. So everything that is happening now, it is because of the lack of implementation and having the spinal cord of this government. They don't have spinal cord to implement anything. That is why we are in this situation.
And the blame game as well, of course, as we know, especially particularly in the city of Johannesburg, we've seen so many mayors since the 1st of November alone. And of course, we knew that the current administration of the current mayor would try to go back to blame the previous administration and even provincial, which of course is to be blamed as well in this instance.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, this government really is not assisting anything. You can't have really this in that municipality only, as we have already alluded to. How many within this 3 years cycle of municipalities, how many mayors have been elected into that council? So the work of the council in that municipality can't happen because everybody wants to take the power rather than thinking about the poor of the poorest, the poor working class people. They don't think about us. What they are thinking about them as politicians is who's taking power. And what they are doing, what are they going to do with that power is only to brag to others that we are now in power. But in terms of the implementation, in terms of the municipal act, they are doing nothing. That is why these buildings are being, as they are labeling it now, are being hijacked by the criminals. And then why are we having these criminals in our society? As communities, as people around Joburg and other areas, we are willing to work with the police. But which police are we willing to work with? Because they are also corrupt police in the system. They are taking money from these drug lords. So whom should we run for? I think the communities themselves must stand up and fight this corrupt government and take it out. And who are we going to install in this government? The people themselves must decide, not politicians. But the communities, the people themselves must decide who should lead, where and when.
Yeah, and I think there's also, I don't know what you make of this, Motsi Khokhoma, the fact that they seem to have blurred the lines between what each department and what each sphere of government's role is in the housing crisis in South Africa. So that's how they find themselves with the blame game. So, it's like nobody really knows what their role is or what their service level agreement said.
It is true. But why should we have these 3 spheres of government? As the cry of the excluded, we are calling for 2 spheres of government. That is where we can see delivery, service delivery. You can't have the provincial sphere of government. What are they doing actually? Because the work is being done by the municipalities. Now there is a commission that is been established either today or yesterday night, we don't know. But today when we wake up, the Premier of Gauteng talks about the commission. How many commissions have been established? There is the Zondo Commission. We haven't heard anything, anybody being arrested through that commission. So what is going to happen? We are just wasting money that can be, used to assist these people to rehabilitate these buildings around Gauteng. But we are taking that money. And the question from your people was saying to Lesufi, how much is this commission going to cost us? He doesn't give a proper answer there. So there's a lot of money that is going to be used for that commission. Why can't the police stand up and take the work and take out these people out of those buildings rather than coming up with a commission? Commission for what?
Yeah, well,
and how much is that commission is going to cost us as taxpayers, even if we are unemployed, but we are paying tax through sweets, through buying anything, that bread, sugar, we are paying tax through that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Motsi Khokhoma, for speaking to us here on eNCA. And you look at the city of Johannesburg's budget, and I'm looking at the surplus. The surplus taxation, for instance, is at $1.2 million. And the surplus deficit for the year was at about 3.3 million. So what's happening with those coffers? Where are they going in terms of what is left over after all the obligations have been met in the city of Johannesburg?